coming up on this edition of Able to Cook. This is the second part. We talk about, actually, this is third part from last time. We talk about food temperatures and people with disabilities. Also, this is because of holidays coming up and we need to know how to cook food. All that and much more when Able to Cook starts right now. Welcome to this edition of Able to Cook, the one and only program that focuses on the needs, concerns, and achievements of people in the kitchen despite their disabilities, and we focus on abilities in the kitchen. We are talking about food temperatures. I would like to thank the following partners and sponsors: thewaitofmyheart.org, the Division for the Blind Vermont, the Association for the Blind Vermont, and also Higher Ability of Vermont. Let's talk about food temperatures. So food temperatures are dealing with anything above 165 degrees, which means that it is completely cooked. So let's talk about something called the danger zone. The danger zone is 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Bacteria grows most rapidly in the range of the temperatures between 40 degrees and 140 degrees Fahrenheit, doubling in the number as in little of 20 minutes. The range of temperatures is often called the danger zone. That's why the meat and poultry hotline, which I'm going to give you at with this website, advises consumers to never leave food out of refrigeration for more than 2 hours. If the temperature is above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, food should not be left out more than 1 hour. If you are traveling with cold food, bring a cooler packed with plenty of ice, frozen gel packs, or get another cold source. If you are cooking using a hot campfire or portable stove, it is difficult to keep foods hot without a heat source when traveling. So it's best to cook foods before leaving home. It's best to cook foods before leaving home, cool them, and then transport them cold. Raw meat and poultry could always be cooked at a safe minimum internal temperature. When roasting meat and poultry, use a oven temperature no lower than 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Use a food thermometer to ensure that meat and poultry have reached a safe minimum internal temperature. Cook all raw beef, pork, lamb, and veal steaks and chops and roast to a minimum internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. And if you're in a international country, they use Celsius. Okay, as measured with a food thermometer before removing meat from the heat source. For safety and quality, allow meat to rest for at least 3 minutes before carving or consuming. For reasons of personal preference, consumers may choose to cook meat at a higher temperature. Cook all ground beef, pork, lamb, and veal to an internal temperature of 160 degrees or 165 degrees Fahrenheit, as measured with a food thermometer. Cook all poultry to a safe minimum internal temperature of 165 degrees measured with a food thermometer. If raw meat and poultry have been handled safely, using the above preparation recommendations will make them safe to eat. If raw meats have been mishandled, left in the danger zone too long, bacteria may grow and produce toxins which can cause foodborne illness. These toxins are resistant and not destroyed by cooking. Therefore, even though cooked, meat and poultry mishandled in the raw state may be not safe to eat and even be in the proper and might not be in the proper preparation. One of the most common causes of foodborne illness is improper cooling of cooked foods. Because bacteria is everywhere, even when food is cooked to a safe internal temperature, they can be introduced to the food and then reproduce. For this reason, leftovers must be in shallow containers for cooling and refrigerated within 2 hours. Now, there's somebody I'm going to talk about which deals with temperatures as well as keeping your hands clean during food preparation. So we're going to talk about Mary Mallon. Mary Mallon was known as Typhoid Mary, and the reason why several years ago, back in 2018, I talked about this, and there is a documentary on PBS dealing with dealing with this. But in September. Now, Mary Mallon was an Irish immigrant that was born on September 23rd, 1869, and she died November 11th, 1938. She was commonly known as Typhoid Mary. Was an Irish-born immigrant, cook, or chef, believed to have infected 51 to 122 people with typhoid fever. Typhoid fever infections caused 3 confirmed deaths, with unconfirmed estimates as many as 50. She was the first person in the United States identified as an asymptomatic carrier of pathogenic bacterium Salmonella typhi, and she was forcibly quarantined twice by authorities. She was working as a cook for the remainder of her life, and she persisted in working as a cook and thereby exposing people to the disease. Mallon died after a total of nearly 30 years quarantined. Her popular nickname, Typhoid Mary, has become the term for persons that spread the disease or other misfortune. From 1900 to 1907, Mallon, M-A-L-L-O-N, Mallon worked as a cook in New York City for 8 families, 7 whom contracted typhoid. And you must keep your hands clean when you go to the bathroom and things like that, so you don't get any diseases. But back then, it was very prevalent. In 1900, she worked in Mamaroneck, New York, where within 2 weeks of her employment, residents of this dwelling developed typhoid fever. In 1901, she relocated to Manhattan, where members of the family whom she worked developed fevers and diarrhea. Malin went on to work for a lawyer and left after 7 or 8 people in that household became ill. In June 1904, she was hired by a prospective lawyer, Henry Gilsey, soon after 7 servants were ill. No Gilsey family members were infected, but they resided separately, and the servants lived in their own house. Immediately after the outbreak, Malin began Immediately after the outbreak began, Malin left and relocated to Tuxedo Park, New York, where she was hired by George Kessler. 2 weeks later, the laundry worker in the household was infected and taken to St. Joseph's Regional Medical Center, where her case of typhoid was the first in a long time. The investigator was Dr. R.L. Wilson, and he concluded that the laundry worker had caused the outbreak but failed to prove it. The laundry worker died soon afterwards. In August 1906, Malin began a job in Oyster Bay, Long Island, where the family of a wealthy New York banker, Charles Eliot Warren, Malin went along with the Warrens and rented a house in Oyster Bay in the summer of 1906 from August 27th to September 3rd. 6 out of the 11 people in the family came down with typhoid. According to 3 medical doctors, the disease at that time was unusual in Oyster Bay. The landlord, understanding that it would be difficult to rent a house with the reputation of having typhoid, hired several independent experts to find the source of infection. They took some water samples from the pipes, faucets, toilets, and cesspool, or well, and they were negative for typhoid. George Soper, an investigator hired by the Oyster Bay property, by the Oyster Bay property owner, and the outbreak there had been trying to determine the cause of the typhoid outbreaks and in affluent families, and it was known that the disease typically occurred in unsanitary conditions. He discovered that a female Irish cook would fit the physical description and had been given was involved with all the outbreaks. He was unable to locate her because she generally left after an outbreak began, without giving for a forwarding address. The Park Avenue outbreak was helped to identify Malin as the source of infections. Soper learned of that case while it was still active and discovered that Malin was the cook. Soper first met Malin in the kitchen of the Bowens Avenue penthouse and accused her of spreading the disease. Although Soper himself recollected his behavior as diplomatic as possible, he infuriated Malin and she threatened him with a carving fork. Malin refused to give samples. Soper decided to compile a 5-year history of her employment. He found that the 8 families that hired Malin as a cook members of 7 claimed to have contracted typhoid fever. Then Soper learned. Hold on a second. Then Soper learned that Malin's boyfriend lived and arranged a new meeting there. It took Raymond Hoopler to persuade Mary to give them urine samples to analyze. Malin again refused to cooperate, claiming that typhoid was everywhere and that outbreaks had happened because of contaminated food. Contaminated food and water. By the time the concept of healthy carriers was unknown, and even to healthcare workers. Soper published his findings June 15, 1907, in the Journal of American Medical Association. Sorry. Again, I'll repeat that. Soper published his findings June 15, 1907, in the Journal of American in the Medical Journal of the American Medical Association. And Soper wrote, "It was found that the family changed cooks on October 4th, and it was 3 weeks before the typhoid epidemic broke out. The new cook, Malin, remained in the family a short time and left after 3 weeks. After the outbreak occurred, Malin was described as an Irish woman, 40 years of age, tall, heavy, and single, and seemed to be in perfect health." And this is the last paragraph before we end today. Soper, the first quarantine was 1907 to 1910. Soper notified the New York City Health Department, whose investigators realized that Malin was a typhoid carrier by sections by sections 1169 and 1170 of the Greater New York chapter. Malin was arrested as a public health threat. She was forced by an ambulance and 5 policemen. Dr. Sarah Josephine Baker, who at the time had to sit on Malin and restrain her. Malin was transported to the Willard Parker Hospital, where she was retained and forced to give samples for 4 days. For 4 days, she wasn't allowed to get up. She wasn't allowed to get up to use the bathroom on her own. The massive numbers of typhoid bacteria that were discovered in her stool samples indicated that the infection source was in her gallbladder. During questioning, Malin admitted that she almost never washed her hands and was not unusual at the time. The germ theory of disease put forth by obstetrician Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis in the 1860s and surgeon Dr. Joseph Lister in the 1880s was still not fully accepted by the general public, especially by the undereducated. After the publication of Soper's article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, Malin attracted extensive media attention and received the nickname Typhoid Mary. Later in a textbook that defined typhoid fever, she again was termed Typhoid Mary. Soper visited Malin in quarantine and telling her he would write a book and give her part of the royalties. She angrily rejected the proposal and locked herself in the bathroom until he left. She hated the nickname and wrote in a letter to her lawyer, "I wonder how the said Dr. William H. Park would like to be insulted and be put in the journal and call him or his wife Typhoid William Park." This ends this edition of Able to Cook. We talked about Typhoid Mary and food temperatures. It's really important. This is a glass of water. Sorry to say it this way, but it's very important to wash your hands, especially when it comes to germs. So we talked about Mary Mallon in the 1900s, 18 and 1900s. If you don't wash your hands, you can't prepare food, especially when you're dealing with the public. And this is why people now have food handlers cards when you're dealing in a professional kitchen. Again, my name is Lawrence Seiler, and this is Able to Cook. For more information on what you've seen today on Able to Cook, you can go to www.orcamedia.net. That's www.orcamedia.net. I'm Lawrence Seiler. Arling's not here today. Thank you to our sponsors and partners. I'm Lawrence Seiler. See you next time.